Looking back on it now, I feel like at the time I was just excited to be a teacher and I just wanted to make it happen and I wanted it to be the best for me and the best for my students. So I don't think while it was happening, I was really realizing the impact that it was making, but that was seriously maybe one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my whole entire life. The good, the bad, and like the crazy. So by the grace of God and also patience with myself, my students' resiliency, and then the help of their parents, we really made it happen. Hey there friends, it's Kate and welcome back to my channel, Golden State Educate. So the day that I'm posting this, it is June 26, 2021, and it is actually my first year anniversary on YouTube. So 1 year ago today, Golden State Educate was born, and I decided to film, edit, and upload my very first video. I was home in my parents' house during quarantine, and I'm actually home again for a summer little vacation. So I decided that there was no better video to film other than my first year of teaching reflection. I've seen this video going around on YouTube, and I love the idea of just kind of taking a second to recap and reflect on my first year of teaching, especially because little did I know, little first year teacher Kate this time last year, what an adventure this year was going to bring. If you've been following along for a while, I'm sure you're caught up with my vlogs. I vlogged my whole first year of teaching and I have documented it here on YouTube, so I'll link a lot of those videos in the cards above and also in the description down below for you to get caught up. But this is just going to be a general overview, the real nitty-gritty, how I felt about my first year, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. So I am so excited. If you aren't already, please make sure to hit the red button down below and subscribe to my channel. Like this video if you liked it, and leave a comment down below what you're doing this summer or how many years that you've been teaching, because I would love to know. I asked you guys on Instagram if you had any first year teacher questions, and I got so many questions. Literally, I think there's like 30 or 40 questions on there. So most of them I feel like I can incorporate into this video in my general like first year teacher reflection, how I felt about my first year and everything that happened. But there were some that were more applicable to having their own video. A lot of people asked about like first year teacher must-haves, so I'll be making a video separately just for that. And then all the questions that I can't answer in this video, I'll probably do like a second Q&A part 2 if I need to do that in the future. I'm just gonna do a little overview of the year. So if you are super caught up on the vlogs, you might want to skip ahead. I'll leave a little timestamp if you do want to skip, but let's just start from the beginning. So this time last year, June 2020, I graduated with my master's in education and my multiple subject teaching credential. So I was certified to teach K through 6th. I student taught in 2nd and 5th grade. I was crossing my fingers for a grade between 2nd and 5th grade because I have a lot of experience with 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and I just thought that would be the best fit for me. So I interviewed for a couple of districts, and then I ended up landing a job in the district that I ended up teaching in, and I got hired to be a first year first grade teacher. And even though first grade was a little bit younger than I was hoping for, I was still really excited about it, and I was ready to jump in. So I spent most of my summer prepping with the first grade team, planning with the first grade team, looking up the curriculum, and just gathering things that I would need for first grade. At that point, we did not know if we were going to be opening up the year hybrid or fully distance learning, but I just kind of had my fingers crossed that we would start in hybrid. Obviously, we did not, but I'll get to that later on. So really excited for first grade. A week before school started, I got the call from my principal asking me to move down and teach kindergarten. Kindergarten was the one grade I said I would absolutely never teach. I was 100% terrified and honestly kind of bummed, but you know, the thing about being a first year teacher is sometimes you just need to take the job. It might not be your dream job, it's not going to be your forever job, but it is a job and it is a way to get yourself in the door. So I knew that doing what my principal needed me to do, of course I was going to say yes and take on that kindergarten position, and that is exactly what I did. So even though I wasn't feeling particularly excited and I was actually feeling 100% terrified about kindergarten, I rolled with the punches, and a week before school started, I changed to kindergarten. So we opened up the year fully distance learning. I do have a video of our first week of school. That video actually did really well. I think there's like 40,000 views on that video. So I did not know that video was gonna explode as much as it did, but I think everyone at that point in the beginning of August, not too many school districts had started, so it was a really good first look at how we were going to start the year distance learning and also start the year with kindergarten. So the first month of school was an absolute whirlwind. I, obviously had never taught before. I also had no experience teaching kindergarten. They had no experience being at school. Some of them had literally never used a computer in their life. And here we were doing school on the computer 7 hours a day, all day, 5 days a week. So it was seriously the most. Looking back on it now, I feel like at the time I was just excited to be a teacher and I just wanted to make it happen and I wanted it to be the best for me and the best for my students. So I don't think while it was happening, I was really realizing the impact that it was making, but that was seriously maybe one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my whole entire life. I was in these people's houses. It's not just with the kids. They're obviously 5 and 6 years old, so their parents were sitting with them the whole first week. They were listening to everything I said. They were so amazing and they were helping me out. Like, I honestly couldn't have done this year without those parents, so that is a huge takeaway. But also having your first year of teaching in a grade that you've never taught, the first week of school, distance learning, all the parents are watching you and you're having to explain things to 5-year-olds. It was seriously the craziest thing, but we did it. I'm so proud of my students for being so resilient, but that first month of trying to get kids to type, look things up on the computer, getting logged into things, was just something that I was not prepared for, and I don't think I possibly could have been prepared for until it was happening. So by the grace of God and also patience with myself, my students' resiliency, and then the help of their parents, we really made it happen. So that was pretty much the first month of school. We were still learning the alphabet. We were learning counting from 1 to 10. So really bringing it back to basics. I think that was kind of the saving grace of this school year. So many things were so hard, but at least the content and the curriculum of kindergarten isn't challenging. So where the actual academics wasn't hard, the getting to every single step along the way was difficult. So, that's just kind of how that went. But I have to say, overall, one of the biggest surprises that I got from this year was how much we grew and how much they learned over distance learning. I truly feel like coming hybrid was sort of when our learning stopped. And again, I'll get to that later on, but I don't want to get too far off topic here. I feel like I can just chat for days, and if you've watched my vlog, you know that I can chat for days. But yeah, I think the biggest takeaway was how much they were able to learn even on the computer, even during fully distance learning, and how set and solid our routines were when we were distance learning. So overall, I think the biggest highlight of the year was how much we were able to learn, considering we were 100% virtual until March, so pretty much the whole school year. Someone asked me what I wish I knew before starting this year, and I thought this was a really interesting question. I know at the beginning of the year, I was constantly saying, if only I knew when we were gonna go hybrid, like if I just knew how long we were going to have to do distance learning, I would be happy. But I'm really, really, really happy that I didn't know how long we were going to be doing that for. I think keeping the hope alive that we were going to go hybrid was keeping me excited and kind of keeping me going. If they would have told me when I got hired in June that I was not going to have students in my class hybrid until March, I think that would have just been really sad. I would feel really defeated. So not knowing kind of ended up being great because we just kept trucking along, and every month we would be like, maybe we'll go hybrid. Every 2 months I was starting to get excited. So that way when it did finally come, it was so special. Getting to end the year in person with most of my class was really, really special. But I think the biggest thing, this is something that I knew, but I also didn't know. Part of the problem that we had were that my students are 5 and 6 years old, and if you've never been around 25-year-olds, it's pretty crazy. They have a lot of energy, and some of the things that they do is just incredibly irrational, and it requires a lot of patience. And the reason that they're being irrational is because they're 5 years old. So I think that was something that I had in the back of my head, and I knew that it was going to be what it was, but I think I maybe could have spent a little bit more time learning how to educate 5 and 6-year-olds instead of just going in and just kind of trying to use what I had learned before, because teaching 2nd through 5th grade is considerably different than teaching kindergarten. So the next question is, what was the best part about your first year? I think there's a lot of good parts. I don't want it to seem like this was the craziest and hardest year ever, even though it was the craziest and probably the hardest year ever. There were definitely some glows to this year. Like I said, we did such a great job in distance learning. I think our whole time of distance learning was, in general, 10 out of 10, so much better than I ever could have thought it was going to be. It ran pretty smoothly. We had really good routines and a really good structure online. So even though the first month is hard, after we got into it, we had a really good flow and they were learning so much more than I thought they would. I also touched on this earlier. My parents were amazing. I seriously couldn't have dreamed up a better group of parents for my first year. They were so supportive. They were so helpful. They were constantly emailing me saying like, we are so appreciative of you. We love you. My child is so excited to come to the computer every day, and they just really love learning with you. So even though it wasn't a typical setting, I think that kind of worked out for me because, you know, parents don't necessarily see the ins and outs of every day, but because of distance learning, they were able to see it all, the good, the bad, and like the crazy. So having a great group of parents was really awesome, and I'm going to miss this bunch so much. Another high point was the community. Our classroom community that we built even when we were online was so incredibly strong. So that way when we did come for hybrid, I felt like our little classroom community was even tighter in person than we were online, but we did have a strong foundation when we were distance learning. And then the last high point of this year was my team. I had an awesome team. If you weren't here from the beginning, you'll know that the entire kindergarten team at my school retired. So I moved down from first grade, and then they kind of pieced our team together from other schools, and then we had to hire a couple other people, but we really came together and we were rock solid. I felt so good about our team. We had a really strong team lead. We had really good team dynamics. We shared a lot of resources, and some of them had taught kindergarten before, so I didn't feel like I was alone whatsoever, and they were incredibly helpful. So that was another highlight of this year. The hardest part of the school year for me was just kindergarten as a whole. I think I kind of grew to love it and grew to understand how to teach kindergarten, but it was never easy, that's for sure. I feel like I learned so much about teaching reading and teaching phonics, so that was a big area of growth for me, but it was hard to learn. So my camera fell off my tripod, so if it's a little bit of a different angle, I'm sorry. So I want to keep it real with you guys. The hardest part of this year was going hybrid. I spent so much of the year being excited to come in person, and it was so great having my students. I'm not going to say that it wasn't great, but it was 10 times harder than being distance learning. We came in March and we only had 2 months left of the school year, and I had some students who had literally never been to school in their life. And I know that procedures are important and you have to drill those procedures, but if you've never taught kindergarten before, those procedures take a long time. In 5th grade, maybe you have to drill procedures for a couple of weeks, but for kindergarten, like some people were telling me that procedures take like up to 2 months to even get good flow. So I feel like we came at the end of the year. The end of the year is supposed to be like the greatest time. I always heard about this like amazing end of the year, like dreamland in kindergarten where they finally get it together and like they know what to do and there's not as many problems. But for us, we only had 2 months of the year left when we finally came in person. So we just didn't even have time to get our procedures like drilled in there. We didn't really have a lot of time, especially too because we were trying to finish out our curriculum and get all the things that they need to know before going to first grade. We had a lot of behaviors in my class. 6 of my students I didn't even get until like 2 weeks before we came for hybrid. So they had another teacher and then they came to me. So there was just so many dynamics that were happening for the first time kind of at the end, which I feel like it was great that they got to come. I'm super excited that I got to meet like so many of my students in person and have so many of them in person. especially before they go to first grade. I think having some in-person time was really important for them, but it was definitely difficult. So there's nothing we could do. We rolled with the punches, but the last 2 months of the school year were very, very challenging. But I feel like I grew so much as a teacher just because of those 2 challenging months. I feel like in those 2 months, I made so much growth in comparison to the time that we were in distance learning. So even though it was hard, I definitely don't regret it. So the next half is pretty much just a reflection on what I learned, what I'm not going to do again, and then what I'm going to do differently for this next school year. So first of all, I'm going to be doing so many different things and so many things differently this year because I'm moving from kindergarten and going to second grade. So I'm super excited about that. And we're also starting the year 100% in person with absolutely no distance learning component. So we are just, it's like a breath of fresh air. We are starting all new for this next year, and there's going to be a lot of changes, and I'm really excited about that. But along the way of this year, I did keep a note, like a little journal of documenting what worked and what didn't work and what I want to do differently next time. So number 1 is the pacing guide. The pacing guide. The pacing guide. Like, I can't say that enough. Okay, so we didn't even really have an ELA pacing guide for kindergarten, and kindergarten is one of the most like fundamental basics year. So the whole time I was just like trying to figure out and piece together what they need to know. So phonemic awareness and, segmenting and blending. And I was just trying to piece all of these things together that I had been hearing about online and that I'd read about in books and seen in some PDs. But not having a pacing guide was challenging. So we had a pacing guide for math, we had a pacing guide for social studies, and the lack of pacing guide for reading and ELA was just really, really hard. So this next year and over the summer, I am going to compile a giant pacing guide for the whole year with all of the subjects. Because we had like bits and pieces all over the place, I was constantly looking at the math pacing guide and then the social studies pacing guide and trying to make my own pacing guide for ELA. And what I really just need to do is have a whole like spreadsheet for every single subject from the beginning of the year to the end of the year and work off the pacing guide. Because then I'll never miss a beat and I'll always have something to look at to keep me grounded and to keep me linear, because I feel like we were good for math and then our ELA was just like crazy town. Like I had no idea, but without a pacing guide, I was absolutely lost. So if there's one thing you take away from this, it is get a pacing guide. And then compile your pacing guide into a whole year so you know what you're supposed to do from week to week and from month to month. Kind of going along with that, I want to print out the standards. I was constantly forgetting and then looking up and checking back at all of the kindergarten standards for California in all of the subjects. So this next year, I'm going to print out all of the standards for math and social studies and ELA and science, even language. So everything that we have is going to be printed out and put into a standards binder, just so that way I can easily look through it and check them off as we go and make sure that I'm not missing anything. One thing that I found was really good and then I kind of lost towards the end of the year was communication with parents. I started off really strong. I had a weekly newsletter. I was communicating with parents all the time. And then I feel like it kind of fell off as we came for hybrid just because I was so tired. I did still keep that weekly newsletter, but it kind of turned into like a weekly 2-paragraph email that I was just sending out. I think communication is always key. Constant communication is going to make it so that way there is no confusion. You're not having to repeat questions and you're not having to answer the same thing a million times in a bunch of different emails. So I think staying on top of parent communication all the time, no matter what, and then just kind of almost putting everything you need all in the same newsletter is going to be important, because I was getting the same email over and over and over again from parents and just having to write the same email over and over and over again or send out group emails. So I think parent communication is key. It's 10 times better to send one just super condensed email instead of a bunch of little emails all the time. Going off of that, I had no idea how many emails I was going to get. Oh my gosh, email Management is going to be key for me this next year as well. I had never really had a Google email before, and I didn't know how many emails I was going to get. I was talking to some of my coworkers and they said, like, usually people can come to your classroom in a regular year, or you'll see people in the staff lounge. So there aren't normally that many emails, but I'm gonna need to figure out a system in terms of topics and folders and getting things organized in my email, deleting things the second I get them and I read them and I don't need them anymore. So email management is key. Going off of that, kind of staying in the digital realm because we were distance learning for so long. Also having an organization system in my Google Drive or just on my computer for all of the curriculum and documents that we were using. It was honestly, in addition to my email, a hot mess. I was downloading things off of TPT, I was saving them in random folders. I didn't have a solid organization system for my online teaching. I had a system in place for if we came in person, and when we came in person, I kind of had like a better filing system for physical documents, but I didn't really have a plan of attack for organizing digital documents. So that is something that I'm hoping to figure out for this summer, so that way I am ready to go and all organized with my digital files for next year. Another thing that I learned is it's important to have must-dos and may-dos for students, but it's also important to have must-dos and may-dos for teachers. I had a really long running list, and if you're a teacher, you know the to-do list never ends. There will be little things and big things and everything in between on your to-do list, and it just gets longer and longer and longer. So I feel like I would procrastinate by doing a bunch of the little things, and then I would have like bigger tasks that would be really overwhelming to have to handle. So I need to make my to-do list and then break it up into must-dos, like very important things that I need to handle and tackle, and then the little things that I can do when I'm done with those big things. Kind of going on that as well, I think it's really important to pick one overarching goal to have for the whole year. I didn't do that this year. I started out like, I just want to teach phonics, I want to figure out how to teach reading, and I want to get really good at that. But at some point I feel like that kind of fell away, and I wanted to do better at math, and I wanted to do better at reading, and I wanted to do better at behavior management, and I wanted to do better at making a classroom community, and like all these things. And I learned, especially as a first-year teacher, you aren't going to be that best at everything. You don't have the resources, you don't have the experience, and you don't have the time to figure out how to be number one, the best teacher in all categories. So it's important to just pick one subject, really research it, devote most of your PDs to that, devote most of your planning time to figure out how you want to run that thing, and then kind of go with that. So that way you can get really strong in one area, and then the next year you can choose another area and just kind of go on with that. So I think choosing one area to sharpen up and get to be an expert in is really important. For me, I don't feel very strong in my math groups. We were okay with our math groups when we were online, but when we came in person, math was just really challenging for me. Even kindergarten math, even though the basics are there, I feel like my systematic math teaching approach really wasn't the greatest. I always felt like I wasn't very good at math as a student, and I felt like I didn't really have really strong math teachers. I'm sure they tried their best, but honestly, I didn't really have that great of a math foundation growing up. So I feel like I've now brought that onto myself. Like, I don't know if I'm the greatest math teacher, so that's an area that I really want to fix, dedicate, and sharpen in this next year. I want to create a good structure, and I want to have consistency, because consistency is always going to be the key to success in education, in my opinion. Figuring out how you want things to run and then executing them and then staying with the way that you're doing it. Obviously, if it's not working, you can change it, but giving it that time to build and giving your students that time to understand, so that way you can just stay consistent the whole time. Actually, signed up for Jillian Starr's Guided Math Academy. I think it's closed for this year by the time I'm posting this video, but she's amazing. I would highly recommend following her on Instagram. I'll have her Instagram down below, but she has this amazing Guided Math Academy program, and it is basically just figuring out how to structure your math time, how to run your math time, there's a second grade math pacing guide. So I think I'm going to get so much out of that this summer. And then by the time we do start the school year and we are starting math groups in second grade, I'll be able to execute it the way that I want to and the way that's going to be most effective for me and most effective for my students learning. And then finally, the biggest thing is procedures. People say that all the time, and that was something that I had starred in my student teaching journal and written down a million times, like procedures. But like I said, starting at basically the end of the year with kindergartners who had never been to school before, our procedures were, we tried, but it was really hard. So figuring out, like I said before, figuring out the way that you want things to be run, teaching it and then drilling it and then staying consistent is going to be super important for procedures. You're never going to regret drilling it and going over them. I felt like after the first week of school, after 1 week of kindergarten, we were good to go and we needed to move on to content. But honestly, I should have spent more time drilling the procedures, because if your students don't know the procedures, it leaves room for questions and chaos and just lack of flow. When you are consistent with your procedures, it leads to student independence, flow in the classroom. It also leads to mutual respect and understanding between student to student and student to teacher. So I feel like procedures are the key to having a successful classroom. The top 3 procedures, in my opinion, to figure out before starting your first year are the morning routine. What do they do when they show up? What do they do when they're finished? So do you want to do an early finisher activity? What do you want to do? What do you do when some kids are finished and others are not done yet? And then the third one is turning things in. So where does it go? How do you want them to turn it in? What's the system for that? So in my opinion, those were the 3 areas that were kind of the most chaotic for us, and that was where there were more questions. So coming in, if they know what to do, the day starts on a good note. When they finish something, they know what to do with it. And then now that they've turned it in, what do they do next? So those 3 procedures are going to be really important just for eliminating stress, eliminating questions, and creating flow in your class. The final thing that I thought would be good to wrap up this first year reflection is, what was your favorite part of kindergarten and what was your least favorite part of kindergarten? Pretty much everyone knows that even though we had a really good year, I was really excited to move on from kindergarten and move up to a higher grade, so I cannot be more excited to teach second grade. But I feel like my students really did have a special place in my heart, and I did grow to love kindergarten while I was teaching it. So I want to end this video on a good note. I think my least favorite part was the fact that they're just brand new, they're really little, and they don't know what to do. So I really love academics, but jumping in, academics kind of take a back seat because you have to teach them how to be students first. I think it was hard to teach them how to be students, hard to teach them how to be in the classroom, and then dealing with those 5-year-old behaviors and figuring out behavior management for a group of 25-year-olds was definitely the hardest and the most challenging part. But my favorite part about kindergarten is how sweet they are. They are so excited to learn. They are so excited to be there, especially by the time we came for hybrid. Like, they were stoked. They were so excited that they didn't even know what to do. And I really loved getting to be the first for them. So many of my students didn't go to preschool, so I was their first teacher. This was their first classroom. These were their first, peers, and everyone in their cohort was the first kiddos that they were really getting to share a classroom space with. I loved facilitating the relationships between them because these kiddos were the first friends that they ever had at school, and just building that strong, happy community environment was definitely one of my favorite parts about kindergarten. All right, you guys, I've been filming this video for 45 minutes. This is such a long video. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much, and hopefully you got something out of this, but that was it. That was my first year of teaching. It was so much harder than I thought it was gonna be, but I'm so proud of myself and I'm so proud of my students for getting through it. And I know that they are going to do amazing in first grade, and I am so excited to have my second year. So I can't believe this is my last time. I can no longer say that I'm a first year teacher, but I am really excited to be a second grade teacher coming up here in the fall. If you are someone who has been watching my channel since the beginning, thank you so much. I wouldn't be doing this if you guys weren't here. sure so much of this is for you. I love documenting my journey and I love connecting with you all here. If you haven't already, please make sure to hit the red button down below and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram. It's just Golden State Educate, and I post a lot more day-to-day things on there. So even though I'll do daily vlogs or weekly vlogs, they're not, live, they're not happening right then and there. So if you want to be caught up with me on a day-to-day basis, make sure to follow me on Instagram. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a crazy year, but I am so excited for the next one coming up, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone.